So let's just go ahead and start off with your background. Maybe tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, cool. So I'm one of the co-founders of alphaXiv. We help people stay up to date and apply the latest research. As a company, I've been working on alphaXiv for like the last year. Before then, I was a student at Stanford as an undergrad and then a master's student right after. Uh, as an undergrad at Stanford, I was doing research in like robotics and reinforcement learning, just in the undergraduate capacity. I think the plan at one point was to be a PhD, but I had a cool internship at any scale, spent some good time in industry, and then yeah, started alphaXiv. So alphaXiv was initially a project. This was even before like ChatGPT was supposed to be like a Stack Overflow for research. And over the years, over the months, it kind of kept growing, kept growing. And then in the last year, we've officially made it a company. And yeah, that's a little bit about me.
Awesome. So maybe tell us a little bit about how you first got interested in research during your time at Stanford, maybe some of the internships you did, and kind of like how that, all those experiences kind of resulted in you finding this problem and the need, and then eventually, the desire to go ahead and found Alpha Hive.
Yeah, for sure. I think the interest in research, predated Stanford even. I think even as a high school student, I remember, perusing archive or finding cool papers to read and share with some of my friends. Um, at the time, we would do like science fair projects, and it was maybe overkill to pour through archive papers, but it was a lot of fun. And then obviously at Stanford, I had the chance to work in Chelsea Finn's lab, and it was just really cool to see a lot of really, really good PhDs, undergrads, kind of all in one place. A lot of the folks in that lab are now doing really, really cool things. And so in the lab, yeah, we were working on like robotic reinforcement learning. So it was like training a robot to do simple block picking tasks, and I found that fascinating, and it was really, really cool. But at the same time, I think when doing research in the undergraduate capacity, I think a lot of the times you're playing a game of catch up. Your advisor will give you a set of papers to read or a task, and you're always kind of trying to understand what's going on. Um, I think, you know, the dynamic would be that most of my questions would be in the individual Slack channel with my mentor. And I think when doing research uh, in this lab, that was the first time that occurred to me that surely other people have questions. And that was the initial framing of AlphaKive. It wasn't anything more than that. It was like, okay, surely there are other people with similar questions on papers or uh, similar points of confusion. And I think one of the points that holds even today is like research papers themselves, I mean, are not written to be understood. So as AlphaKive went on, I learned like this was not an undergraduate problem. Like grad students have this problem, like researchers, people in industry, you name it. Like following research is really, really hard. And I just felt that in the capacity of, okay, trying to understand a paper. But that being said, it was a hard process, but it was really cool. Like the actual process of figuring something out, writing your own paper, posting it, going to a conference. I think that was all really, really cool. And before I guess my one of my first internships at any scale, which is more of like a research and industry type, it was more of a research and industry type position. I had wanted to do a PhD, um, and I guess the experience at any scale showed me, okay, people do research at companies and in industry, and it's in many ways even more fast paced. And people were reading papers there too. At that point, I was also starting to show people AlphaKive, and the problem was resonating there as well. Um, but yeah, I think that's a little bit more about my journey doing research. I think for sure, if I wasn't doing AlphaKive in some capacity, I would either as a PhD or these days in some position in industry, I would be doing that. So
Awesome. So, I think one of the things that is super fascinating is that all of this kind of started as a project and then ended up evolving into something greater than that. And then,
yeah,
also is, currently continuing to evolve in terms of kind of who you're helping,
yeah,
how you're helping them, so on and so forth. So,
yeah,
this is really quite the story. So maybe tell us a little bit about kind of the origins. Like, where did you start? How did you start? And kind of tell
yeah,
us a little bit about sort of the trajectory of how AlphaKive has changed, how the problem has changed, how the solution has changed, how
for
you and
sure.
your co-founder has changed. Tell us the
Yeah.
story.
Yeah, for sure. So if we want to track down the true beginning of AlphaXiv, this was actually almost like 3 years ago. It was a final project for an intro to web dev class at Stanford. So actually at the time I was taking an intro to web dev class because I needed to get the minimum units for the quarter because that was the quarter that I was submitting to NeurIPS. So it was super busy and I just wanted to do research and I needed to take like the simplest what I felt would be the simplest class. And for the final project, I was like, okay, let me put together a really silly version of this comments on papers. I've been thinking about it for a while. Let me put together something, and it was really poorly done. I'm pretty sure I got like a B in the class, which is hard to do at Stanford. But after that, like it was kind of sitting on my laptop, and then a year later, so now we're talking 2 years ago, I showed it to my roommate Raj, also in another class that was completely unrelated, um, and he thought it was really cool. So we started sharing it within our lab. The continued theme was people's initial reaction was like, "Oh, why doesn't this exist?" And that's a pretty good reaction because it's like, okay, let's find a way to make this exist. Um, and so still in the capacity of being a project kind of for the next kind of year, we would share it, evangelize it. People would share it online. And then around maybe, when is this now? Like a year and a half ago, one of our friends, maybe 2 years ago, one of our friends posted this he was from FAIR at the time, so Facebook AI Lab. He shared it on LinkedIn, and it totally made the rounds. Like, I got like probably 1 million impressions and several thousand likes. And at that point, we're like, okay, there's really something here. People are interested, but still in the project capacity. So we kept working on it. It caught the attention of Sebastian Thrun, who's the Waymo founder. He also did Udacity. And so I stopped doing research uh, in robotics, and I took the next 2 quarters to work with Sebastian and a few other of our friends. So Daniel, one of the co-founders, Raj, we kind of went full speed ahead, still as a project. So thinking, okay, how can we get this to more people? How can we spread this? Uh, and then at some point, this was now a year and a half ago, we were talking with Sebastian about where to take this. So this summer was coming up. We were all supposed to intern, and I think Sebastian did a good job convincing us that okay, uh, as a project, you kind of limit the reach and capacity and impact it could have in this specific case. Maybe that's not in every case, but in this case, we were totally feeling every time it would make the rounds, the site would go down. It was sitting on this like shitty small EC2 instance, and we weren't going to have the time to even maintain it if we were going to intern. So it was making the rounds. The site quality wasn't keeping up with the actual interest. But we still didn't have, what I was telling Sebastian and even Raj and Daniel at the time was obviously we didn't have an idea of if this wasn't a project, how on earth this would be a company, right? I think Sebastian made that pretty easy. He just like wrote us our first angel check. A few investors followed on from there. And we're like, okay, there's projects like Papers with Code out there, which was, it was a company, Weights and Biases, Hugging Face, and was a good precedence. And what we felt a year and a half ago, even without honestly any clarity in the beginning of what exactly the product would look like, I think we had a strong sense of, okay, we're trying at a high level, we're trying to make the lives of researchers easier. How, we don't know exactly how. At that time, it was comments. We're trying to make these folks' lives easier. And there's good precedence for tools that are trying to make these folks' lives easier, becoming like very good, very productive and impactful companies. So that was the high level thinking when starting a year and a half ago. Like, let's, and if you think about the group of researchers, like just researchers as a whole, obviously this was the case a year and a half ago. The interest in research, we felt this year and a half ago, has never been larger, and that is true today. If we were to try this 5 or 10 years ago, maybe it would be a little bit more of maybe an ivory tower project. But the emphasis on research has never been greater, right? So like 10 years ago, going out of college, if you look at Stanford, 10 years ago, people leaving Stanford wanted to go work as software engineers, right? These days, people want to go be researchers out of college. Like that is FANG is not the meta, and people want to go do research. And we felt like the headwinds were in the right direction. Like if we keep building for this group, like that's going to be good. And so that's what we did. The first summer we were working this as a company, it was still comments, and with a fair bit of success. So folks like the Llama 3 authors, the LoRa authors, they would come on alphaXiv and answer people's questions. It was the first time it really made the rounds on Twitter. It's like Jan LeCun, Jack Dorsey, you name it. it was getting shared on Twitter, and that was really, really cool. We knew comments wasn't going to be the final state of this, but it was like, okay, there's some real interest here. And so comments, once we had enough traction on comments, we were like, hey, we know what papers people are reading. So comments then became a trending paper page. Then it became personalized feeds for papers. Before we knew it, we had AI chat feature on top of the paper. So we realized like a lot of the questions people were asking, like a lot of these were clarification questions that could be answered. So we, like would highlight, we put a simple feature that would allow people to highlight sections of the paper, um, ask an AI questions, but it was done in a very intuitive fashion. Again, thinking about like what exists and how do we just save people time. So, making a really intuitive AI chat feature. From there, we realized a lot of the questions people were asking the AI chat were just to get a gist of the paper. So then we introduced AI blogs, like really concise, accurate, uh, AI generated blogs complete with images from the paper. And it felt simple, but there was a real reach and impact. So the blog post feature has reached like over 1 million different people from like 100+ countries. We would translate the blog post. So from there, now we were really getting in our groove. It would make the rounds in like Telegram in Russia, Red Note in China, Twitter in Japan, obviously Twitter in the US, LinkedIn, you name it. And from there it was very clear, like, okay, we were now like really saving people a lot of time, like going through papers. We introduced like a deep research assistant to now not just focus on individual papers, but the corpus of papers. And that was, earlier this summer. So that's approaching where we are today. But you'll see there's kind of a logical continuum of like focus on this group of users that initially was just very broad. It was researchers. From there, it started to narrow down to like AI researchers, applied AI researchers, and just like make their lives, as easy as possible. They have a lot of things they need to juggle, and so initially it was just like help them understand papers. And the direction we're going in now is papers are just kind of one part of the applied AI research life cycle. So now we're going through papers and indexing and pulling up relevant benchmarks to make it really easy for people to figure out like what's state of the art and what's not. Going in the direction of helping people understand even data sets, paper implementations, experiments. There's a whole part of the workflow here that we feel is kind of similarly broken. And what we did for papers, we want to just do for the rest of the research workflow. But yeah, that's kind of a quick breakdown of alphaXiv to date.
Awesome. What a breakdown, man. What a breakdown. Great
Yeah,
job. This
yeah,
journey is truly incredible.
yeah,
Okay, so let's just go ahead and dig a little bit deeper into like sort of
yeah,
like what applied AI research means and kind of what the
yeah,
life cycle of an applied AI researcher is. Kind of seems
yeah,
like pretty integral to what you guys are doing because,
yeah,
now that you guys have sort of figured out your specific segment of the market that you want to help,
yeah,
it's now kind of important to think through what features you want to build, so on and so forth. You
yeah,
kind of talked about this concept of a life cycle. Like, what
yeah,
is the life cycle? How do you guys break it down? And in tandem
yeah.
with that, what are the features that you're looking to build soon?
Exactly. Yeah. So if you look at how applied AI research is maybe different from the traditional research workflow, first of all, it's one of the most popular job titles today. If you spend any time on LinkedIn, for better or worse, you'll see, these days, anyone that was a software engineer, they want to have research be a part of their job title, right? So these are research engineers, applied AI researchers, and where it differs from traditional research is the goal isn't necessarily to discover something new, but it's to implement the latest research and really, really quickly. So the timetables for applied AI researchers, it's like you may enter a meeting on Monday and have to give some results by Friday. So the dynamic in companies maybe in the last decade was there's PMs and software engineers. Now there's PM software engineers and applied AI researchers. So there's this now like unknown variable that companies need to kind of handle and wrestle with. And the goal is like I have some product scope here. It's not defined by a research problem. It's defined by product. It's like how can I integrate the latest research to make that product good as fast as possible? Um, and so, what does that look like? So implementation speed is really, really important. That's almost beats thoroughness in a sense. And if you look at the users on alphaXiv today, I think a vast majority of, say, the 120,000 plus users on here today are applied AI researchers. So these aren't necessarily just folks that frontier labs and university researchers, although they're folks from there on alphaXiv, but it's folks from like a long tail of companies that you might not traditionally expect. So like Spotify, Cisco, Apple, you name it. These are folks that are trying to integrate research. And so what that means for us is if you look at the research workflow, it's okay, I have a product scope, then I need to understand what's going on. That's step two for an applied AI researcher. Stuff is moving so quickly, and you see like what papers are relevant, what papers are implementable, like what papers are even worth implementing, or worth my time. Maybe there's a paper that delivers really good results, but where research and applied AI research differs, if there's a paper that delivers really good results, but there's just no way to implement it, I don't care. Like I need to find a way to be able to implement it. And from there, it's experimenting, analyzing. And so as far as the future of alphaXiv as a product, today we're really helping with steps 2 and 3. Like we've kind of stumbled upon, without realizing this in the beginning, we've kind of stumbled upon helping applied AI researchers with steps 2 and 3, which are helping people know what on earth is going on. Like there's a fire hose of research out there. So kind of what's going on. And then which, even today, the product's kind of helping people figure out like what are the core ideas of the paper? Is it easy to implement? Um, and there's very simple features we have that help people figure out what's worth implementing. We automatically link papers to GitHub and help people sort papers by GitHub stars. It's super simple, but it provides real value in helping people filter through research. But from here, it gives us a really logical set of next steps of where we want to take the product. Okay, how do we help people more figure out what papers are easy to implement? So we're working on an agent that kind of making our deep research assistant more catered towards paper implementations. So we've been putting out implementations of OCR models, for example. We put out simple to use playgrounds where people can play around with the OCR model. And you can imagine a future where a user comes to alphaXiv, uploads some sample data, and then we go run relevant OCR models, and they can quickly see the outputs to see what's worth spending more time to dive deeper into. And then we want to also be part of that process where a user decides to dive deeper into a given model. So one thing we're working on separately is an experimentation assistant. So let's say you've picked an OCR model that you want to fine tune on. So you've taken the model, you're running a bunch of experiments. Typically, ML researchers will use like lightweight experiment trackers to kind of track the thousands of experiments they'll do. So we're kind of continuing this theme of building this intelligent layer for research where our agent will now like track code. And this is not public, it's a beta feature right now, but it'll probably be rolled out in the next few weeks where our agent will kind of look at code diffs between the different experiments to give suggestions on, what to try next, what relevant papers or works there to read. But if you look at this whole research workflow can kind of be distilled into this intelligent layer for research, which is what alphaXiv is. But yeah.
Awesome. Sort of moving forward, maybe tell us a little bit about kind of like how you guys are looking to actually integrate with enterprises or end customers. Like, kind of what's your plan there?
Yep. Yeah, for sure. I think we kind of look at it from a bottoms up approach, which is even now with 100,000 folks on here, there's room to grow and just we want to look at it from the angle of before thinking about enterprise, it's like how can we just provide as much value to the individual applied researcher as possible. Like, it's like very encouraging to see folks come to us and be like, oh, we are saving them many hours, and want to keep pulling on that thread. So thinking about the rest of the research workflow, and first think about alphaXiv from the prosumer standpoint of like, okay, what features can we integrate into a pro plan? What makes sense still in the free plan of alphaXiv, and still from the standpoint of an individual user, what can we do there? And then, a lot of our users are from companies. People come to us all the time asking like, when is the organization plan coming? When is the paid plan coming? Like people come to us with those requests pretty regularly, and we're just trying to be disciplined about, okay, there will be a time where the pro plans come out, where the organizational plans come out, but there is totally precedence to a bottoms up play here of growing out. I mean, you see this with like Figma or even like Discord. You grow bottoms up, just provide value to the community. That's the North Star first, and then the monetization will follow. Again, first from the individual pro plan, and then from an organizational plan down the line. Um, but yeah, you can think about some of the features beyond papers that we're working on would lend themselves well to uh, kind of a team plan or paid plan. Obviously, the public side of alphaXiv, like the trending page and some of the features around that's providing value, and that's going to be public and free for as long as alphaXiv's around.
Hmm. Awesome. So you sort of hinted at earlier, things like Hugging Face, Papers with Code,
Yeah,
archives, so on and so forth. A lot of these
yeah,
kind of like, more broadly dev tools. I mean, weights and
yeah,
biases,
yeah.
core weave, so on and so forth. Um, let's kind of like maybe zoom out more broadly, right? Like, I mean,
Mhm.
AlphaCiv as a company is trying to help, as you kind of, elucidated, these like applied AI researchers with
Yeah,
whatever workflow they're working on. But there are a lot of different tools that sort
yeah,
of in different ways help applied
yeah,
AI researchers with what they're doing. There might be,
yeah,
observability tools like say Datadog or CoreWeave. There might be
yeah,
other schools, like other tools that are more analytics heavy. There's obviously
yeah.
code generation tools like say Claude Code and Cursor,
Yep.
Windsurf, so on and so forth.
Yeah,
How do you kind of see yourselves fitting in with the competition in terms of like
yeah,
everything else going on,
yeah,
particularly because it seems like, and obviously feel free to correct this understanding, um, but a lot of the aspects of a developer's workflow, a lot of the aspects of an AI researcher's workflow are fragmented across multiple different products, which are all
yeah,
owned by different companies. So is your
yeah,
goal to unify all of these, just work on one specific aspect? Maybe tell us a
yeah.
little bit about that.
Yeah, we view alphaXiv as an integration game where we want to win with researchers' workflows and then use that to deliver a better experience. So what does that mean? There's, in a sense, alphaXiv is like a intelligence layer and an artifact layer. And having more artifacts helps deliver a better experience for alphaXiv. So let's look at the realm of papers for a second, just to ground the conversation. Then we'll talk about these other features in a bit. Um, but with papers, right? Um, we have a great relationship with the folks at Archive, by the way. We're an Archive Labs project, and we speak with them pretty regularly. In our eyes, what we've done with papers is we've kind of built this intelligent layer on top of papers, right? This intelligent community layer, um, and started with comments, and we kept pulling this sort of, okay, how do we provide more use? How do we? There's these different workflows researchers have with papers. Let's play this integration game and put them all here. What that did was that brought users, and we used that usage to deliver a better experience, right? Um, so when more people were reading papers, we got a better sense of what papers were relevant. So that gave us better recommendations, a better feed, better signal to noise, and that got more people on here. And it's like a compounding flywheel effect. Um, and so when you look at the rest of the research workflows, first of all, we look at this less of dev tools and more research tools, right? Like these are researchers; they're no longer developers, and how can we make their lives easier? So let's think about experimentation. When thinking about how to rope in experimentation into our assistant, um, it's again intelligent layer, artifacts layer. So right now with artifacts we have papers. Now let's say we want to add experiments to the list of artifacts to build a more intelligent assistant. Um, it should be really easy to integrate with weights and biases. So it's not necessarily that we are like, oh, we're going to build a library that replaces Wanby. Like Wanby is really, really useful to the community. It's like, how do we integrate Wanby into the workflow? So we want to make it really easy for people to sync their Wanby results into the assistant, um, and then be able to see code diffs between different Wanby runs, and now that's integrated into the assistant. So now you can imagine like if the goal is to build this really good intelligence layer on top of research, just having papers isn't good enough, right? You like in a sense, papers is a skewed view of research. You only know what's worked, right? What if you can know what experiments have failed, what's worked, what's not, um, not just with a user but within the community. So okay, make it very easy to sync with Wanby or with papers or implementations or data sets or whatnot. So you don't want to go out and rebuild, say, like a Claude code or Wanby. It's a figure out how can I integrate this into the platform. And the reason we want to integrate this into the workflow is not because it needs to be on alphaXiv. It's like our users come to us being like, okay, I have these questions for the assistant that the papers aren't good enough at answering, so I need more context. Um, or my experiments are really disorganized, or there's benchmarks and data sets, and I would love if that could be on alphaXiv. So when you have more artifacts and more workflows, you just at the end it goes back to delivering more value to the user. Um, as you've touched on, it's fragmented, and uh, unifying it helps build a really good intelligence layer for research. You have all this context in one place. So that's really the lens we view alphaXiv in. But yeah, that was a good question.
Awesome. I mean, more broadly, I think one thing you guys
Yeah,
have done an exceptional job of is engaging with community, in
yeah,
particular technical community. So, you guys have a really great set of talks that you guys have been hosting.
yeah,
You guys have hosted obviously events in the past as well. Maybe
yeah.
tell us a little bit about how you guys have gone about sort of building that community, in particular because, um, a lot of people can build a website, they can build a platform, but I think a
Mhm.
lot of people, including a lot of the engineers and researchers in the audience, might struggle with actually getting people to start using it, right? So
Yeah,
getting people to actually start with a snowball. In
yeah.
recommendation systems, as I'm sure you know, there's this thing called the cold start problem, where it's very
Yep.
hard to make recommendations initially because you don't have that much data in your system. Similarly,
Yeah.
when it comes to, getting users onto a platform, there's also a cold start problem of sorts where you might not have that many users initially, but in order for you to get, user n plus one, you need to have n be ideally large. So
Mhm.
tell us a little bit about how you kind of solve that problem. Like, how did you build that community in the beginning? How did you build that utility? And how did you sort of overcome this cold start problem?
Yeah, I think pretty simply it goes to the point that we were and still are the ICP of alphaXiv, and we go to great lengths to make sure that's the case. So when we started, we were learning research in universities and applying it as interns at companies. So we were totally the ideal customer for alphaXiv at every stage of the journey. So when we were doing comments, it was because we literally had questions. So we would, in the super early days of alphaXiv, like we would feature papers in the community that we were reading and had questions for. So at the very least, if no one else had questions on papers, we had questions. So we would go out and seed questions on papers, and then the authors would be like, "Oh, this is amazing! Like people have questions on my work." Like researchers want to talk about their work, and there aren't always the best avenues for them to do that. And then as we kept developing AlphaCode, it was always like features that we would use or we thought made a lot of sense. And even now, being a year and a half removed from research, we are really careful to make sure, like, okay, at least within AlphaXiv, there's like there there are folks that need to be doing research. So when we're developing our recommendation systems or assistant, um, we'll be even like working on libraries that we think are cool, just to make sure that we're doing research and we get a sense of what that workflow is and what people are interested in and what people like. And so that extends to communities. As we built out the user base, obviously now that we have an audience, uh, we thought, hey, we want to have community events on here, and we have a good sense of what talks people want to have and what people want to listen to, just because that's what we want to listen to. Um, so I think yeah, we haven't looked at it from the lens of how do we grow the user base or what feature is going to maximize the user accounts. It's like what do we think is cool, and then obviously as we grow it, being close to a lot of the applied AI researchers and making sure it's resonating with them as well.
Mhm. Awesome. So tell us a little bit about kind of like, some of the infrastructure challenges that you might have to face. I think in particular, kind of as your site, as you mentioned, 100
Yeah.
plus countries, tons and tons of people using it. This kind of started as like a web dev project and then maybe
Yeah.
evolved a little bit.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about the scaling strategy.
Yeah, for sure. I think the scaling, the bottleneck around scaling was more of the real curve. Even though there's been a lot of growth, it was less about the growth curve and more about the learning curve here. Like we didn't know web dev when we started, and so a lot of the mistakes we made were like poor design decisions very early on that kind of bled into today. And obviously, I think a lot of the infrastructure challenges they've been growing pains, and we fixed a lot of it. But yeah, I think a lot of the biggest difficulties were poor design decisions we made early on. So just to talk in specifics, like one decision I think I regret pretty early on was like using MongoDB in our backend. I think like early on there was no TypeScript, so we just used like JavaScript. I guess we used React, like an EC2 instance, no scalability, MongoDB, Express. Today now we're using like Bun, TanStack. We now finally have PostgreSDB in the backend. Um, but there was certainly a lot of learning curve. So let's pick the database, right? So with MongoDB, I don't think inherently there's anything wrong with MongoDB, but I do think one of the biggest challenges with something with like MongoDB and why it's so popular, it's like really easy, it's like scarily easy to get started if you're a beginner. Like it's so easy to use MongoDB. And the biggest trap is it's really easy to be undisciplined. Like you can use MongoDB as like freaking Google Docs. Like that's what it is. It's like you can literally use MongoDB as Google Docs. So all the papers we were storing in our database, like damn near every entry was like different from the other one. And so now as you start to scale to like not just users, but we have like 2 million papers indexed here. At some point, like if you want to build great recommendations or really fast search and like embeddings and similarity search, it was starting to kill us. So we had like honestly a several months migration just on the database side of things. There were several smaller migrations throughout that were just a function of poor design decisions. So now obviously we've been a lot more careful about big design decisions we make. I think part of it also, to be honest, was before it was less even a web design thing, but before this project, all my experience was writing research code. So there's a big difference between writing research code and production code. That's not just in web dev, right? So the big difference between those two. And so I was definitely when doing alphaXiv in the beginning, I was writing it like research code, so it's absolutely awful, hard to follow. Um, and so as we onboarded other folks, that became a challenge. So I think I have personally learned a lot about what it takes to build good scalable systems uh, that that work well and scale for many users.
Mhm. Awesome. Sort of like as we kind of get close to the end here, maybe we can kind of like zoom out even more broadly. Research, as you kind of mentioned, has changed a lot, right? Like most people that are now graduating from college are, as you sort of, mentioned, like interested in research, as opposed to maybe just pure
Yeah,
engineering, or maybe,
yeah,
it's starting to shift more towards the research direction. Research is kind of what's interesting now. There's kind of a split behind or sort of between applied research, theoretical research, and more
yeah,
recently we're starting to see a lot of, different companies doing, for instance, RL for enterprises, whether that's
yeah,
thinking machines, things like that as well.
yeah,
Research is a very fast evolving domain.
yeah,
Whether there's like, kind of what is now being coined as neo labs, these sort of new
yeah,
frontier model labs, that are startups,
yeah,
or that is, as you mentioned, kind of innovation at larger companies.
yeah,
How do you sort of see the ecosystem playing out in terms of like what the definition of being a researcher looks like over time? Do you think we're going to move more towards researchers being more on the applied side? Do you think that there's a chance that things get reinvented past that? Intuitively, like if we thought back 10 years ago, like what does research mean? Or maybe
yeah,
20 years ago, for instance, a lot of it would be, like PGM, like probabilistic graphical models, convex
yeah,
optimization, Bayesian statistical learning, so on and so forth.
yeah,
Now, when we think about research, a lot of it is like agents, right? Or, benchmarks for
yeah,
coding agents and things like this, which are a little bit different. So,
yeah,
how do you guys plan to sort of keep changing the product as the definition of research continues to change? And
yeah,
where's that headed?
yeah, for sure. I think, well, I guess long story short, there will be multiple winners here in terms of, you know, people that are trying to build around research at various levels of the stack. I mean, the analogy you can draw is like with web development, right? Uh, how the landscape of web development has changed over the last 10, 20 years. There's tools that help at every level of the stack. If you're a beginner and looking for an easy way to start out, like tools like even at the true top of the stack, there's things like Lovable, or even before then, the Wix and WordPresses of the world, and there's Vercel, and there's actual tools and frameworks like Next.js and TanStack, and you name it. Um, and I think I think that'll play itself out here, where there's going to be multiple levels of the research stack, right? And you see this today. There's people that okay, there's RL as a service basically that happens today, and that's great. And there's obviously a real use case for that, but that's not everything. Now, maybe that's towards the upper end of the stack where you don't necessarily need to be a researcher with a PhD to use that. It's catered towards enterprises and various like industrial use cases. But at the same time, there's going to be companies that have applied AI researchers that hire in-house, and they need their own set of tools. And right now, that's the set of users that we're looking at. But I think obviously the landscape's going to change, and I think it's going to broaden, right? I think more and more people are getting into research, and there's going to be different parts of the stack that people funnel into. There's going to be the traditional theoretical research, of course, in universities and these neo labs. Um, the reason we've been focused on applied AI research is it gives us a reasonable scope to work with. It's like people that are trying to iterate quickly and apply AI research. There's a lot of them, and a lot of them happen to be on our platform. So we kind of, how we look at our strategy is just keep thinking about how to make them happy and what parts of the workflow make sense for them. But you're right. I think that our user base is maybe different than the one that uh, you know, like an RL as a service might be built for. It's certainly a different set of users, and it falls under the umbrella of research. So it just speaks to how research is broadening in scope, and this has happened in other industries before. So
Mhm. Awesome. Sort of maybe our last question here. Tell us a little bit
yeah,
about kind of the team behind alphaXiv. So you sort of mentioned, that you have a lot of really great people, a lot, from Stanford with the founding team. Just maybe tell us a little bit about kind of who, like, the founding team, how you guys have grown, how you guys are continuing to grow, if you guys
yeah,
are hiring, who you guys are looking for in particular, given that the audience here is
yeah,
generally really, really incredible engineers and
yeah.
researchers. And then
Cool.
lastly, I mean, a lot of people in the community that are listening are likely applied researchers and or users of alphaXiv. That
Yeah,
might be part of the reason why they clicked on the video. Like, how can they help you? Like, is there anything
yeah,
that they can do? Is there any sort of, I don't know, test pool or something like that where you guys have
yeah,
some beta and are trying to collect user feedback or customer
yeah.
surveys? Just give us a rundown.
Yeah, for sure. In terms of the team, as a founding team, it's actually four of us, three from Stanford, one from Berkeley. So it's myself, Raj, Daniel, and Lino from Berkeley. Uh, I think as a founding team, first of all, on the engineering side, Lino has been doing web development his whole life. So he's kind of even though he's 2 years younger than us, the adult in the room when it comes to knowing what it takes to build a great web stack and product and great engineering stack. Daniel is kind of the uh, guy that knows everything about product, so talking to users, knows the ins and outs, and understands the level of detail and care it takes to make a great product. Raj focuses a lot on the community, um, actually growing alphaXiv from the ground up. I'm kind of firefighter, whatever needs the most help, I'm on it. But I think one of the cool things about working on a product that's this user facing is that's exactly who we hire. That's exactly who we interface with and get user feedback from. And so as we've grown out the team, yeah, it's been folks that have either heard of about alphaXiv before. Um, Anytime we're looking to hire, we just email our user base, and obviously we have the opportunity to hop on podcasts like this. So concretely, we're looking to hire like applied AI researchers, ML researchers, as we start to focus on the rest of the stack. We're kind of making an emphasis on not just having the team be one type of engineer. The alphaXiv won't just be a website in the future. There'll be libraries and ways for people to interface with alphaXiv. So we're looking to hire folks with ML research and ML engineering backgrounds. And remind me what the last point you had was?
No, just like if there's, any type of, customer surveys or
Yeah.
anything, in
Yeah,
order
yeah, for
to
sure.
help.
On our site, we have an email to reach out to. So if you are a super user of alphaXiv or interested in contributing, you should definitely just email us. We absolutely have a short list of users that we have beta test our latest features. And so we would absolutely uh, love to have you folks reach out to us there. And you can also email us there if you're looking to join alphaXiv in a full-time capacity as well. We'd be happy to entertain that as well.
Awesome. Well, without further ado, thank you so much for coming on the podcast, Rehan.
Yeah, thanks for having me.